Welcome to another session. I hope you were well. In the session I covered, particularly the last two, I made reference to how to understand whether you have energy balance in your favor or whether you have the energy balance against you. In other words, how to, by making observations with regards to your bodily function and how you feel, how you could deduce as to whether uh, things are working in your favor from an energy perspective or against you. In other words, are you spending too much or do you have enough? I start today's session with what will become a deep dive into the whole concept of energy, but more importantly, what I call the energy equation. Let me start by saying this. Um, we all understand how money works. Money, we use it as a multiplier, as a tool. We can spend it, we can invest it, and we can save it. Energy is very similar to money in many ways. We create energy, then we spend energy. Now, I don't know about you, but I'll speak to myself and my experiences. Obtaining money, the whole business of acquiring wealth, exchanging your services, your labor for money is hard. It takes a long, long time, which is why most people do not have money. The whole business of actually investing, saving, diligently planning, living on less than you earn is hard work. On the other hand, spending money is a lot of fun. Um, we can spend 40 hours, which is what most people invest in exchange for money in a week. We can spend 40 hours acquiring, let's use a useful example, let's say £1,000. 40 hours, that's what you earn in a whole week, and that is very, very generous because the average person does not make that much. But you can earn £1,000 after 40 hours of labor, working 5 days a week, 8 hours every single day. But in 1 hour, sometimes 1 hour being very generous, in half an hour, you can spend £1,000. So it takes you 40 hours to earn, but it takes you a fraction of that time frame to spend. That's how money works. Similarly, that's how the body functions and how energy functions through the body. The question, therefore, as we go along in today's session, is in thinking about depression and in thinking about how to understand at the foundation what you're dealing with. We start with energy because energy is everything. The human body is purely energy, masses, atoms, just another form of energy. The question is, how does the body generate all this energy? How does the body generate all this money? Remember, most people are depressed primarily because there's something amiss. For some people, it's a physical deficit in whatever form. That could be an energy deficit. For some other people, it could be a psychological, emotional deficit. And for some other people, it could be a spiritual. Now, for a very select group, it could be a combination of one or two. But we start with the first. How does the body generate energy? But more importantly, how does the body spend the energy it generates? Now, in the sessions I started with, I made reference to the importance of using analogies. They're very important. It was a simple way that I got to learn about complicated things. Someone using an analogy of a tree to explain how we grow wealth. You plant the seed, you water the seed, you cater for the soil, you wait. In due season, in due time, you have the tree, you have fruit, then you can eat of the fruit. You can plant some of the produce from the tree. That was a simple analogy of explaining how life works. That if someone gives you something, if what you have is not enough, then it becomes, and it should be, a seed. If what you have is sufficient and it is enough, then it can become a harvest. That was a simple analogy. I've used the car analogy in the prior sessions, and so I will continue with the car analogy. Think about your body as a car. Just picture this, because most people, we live in homes, we drive, we travel, or we are driven in cars. So for most people, the car concept works. Whether you drive or you don't, you will understand the concept. In every car, you have several parts. You have an engine, you have a fuel system, you have oxygen that is actually burnt in the engine. You have fuel mixing with oxygen, but that's delivered to the part of the engine where it's mixed in a certain proportion to create energy. You have a circulation system. You have inside the car what we call a clutch function, an accelerator function or pedal. You have a gearbox, something you use to change the gears. The other parts of the car that function, you have windscreen, you have wipers. All of the various components of the car serve a function. Then you have what we call maintenance of the car, things you have to do regularly to ensure the car is safe for the road. So in the UK, we have things such as annual service, biannual or half-yearly service. We have MOTs, which we do once every year, which is where you do a checkup to make sure the car is safe. We have other things. We have things in the car like a toolkit, spare tires, or whatever the car comes with that provides a way for you to diagnose or a way for you to repair issues should the car stop along the way. And in the engine, you have other things. In the bonnet, you have other things. You have things like where you put water into. You have where you put oil into, various types of oil. All of these parts of the car serve a function. They serve a purpose. They all come together to do one of many things, to ensure that the car operates according to the user manual, the way the manufacturer intended for the car to function. You can have a well-designed car, an exceptional machine, but if you put the wrong fuel in the car, something wrong goes as expected. The car will not function. As a matter of fact, for some cars, you have a malfunction, which is where the car just breaks down completely and says, that's it, I'm done. For some other people, you can have the best engine, you can have the best interior, you can have the right water, you can have the right fuel in that tank. But if you don't have the car keys, you can't start the car, you can't drive the car. The body is synonymous from the purpose of this analogy to a car. Think of your body as a car. If you have symptoms of depression, anxiety, worry, stress, if you have symptoms that suggest that perhaps there's certain parts of your physical well-being where something is amiss, think of yourself, your body particularly, as the car. Now, there's a part of you which I haven't addressed, which is if you think about all the components that I've discussed, you can have a beautiful car. Everything works. It's been serviced, it's been maintained well, and the car just sits there, not enjoyed, not fulfilled, not doing what it was supposed to do. Reason being, there is no driver. There is no one to get into the car and drive the car and use the car in a manner for which it was designed. Now, of all the parts of the car that I have explained, let me connect this to you, the individual. Remember, the car in your body. Think of your body as a car. What we call the engine, from a car's perspective, will be what we'll call your mitochondria. What we call the fuel or the fuel system in a car will be the same as your diet and your what we call your gut function. The oxygen that goes in, that's pulled into the car through the air circulation system will be your lungs. Breathe in, breathe out. We suck in oxygen, we breathe out oxygen and other things. The fuel in the car will be synonymous with what we call your energy or oxygen delivery system. And that occurs, think about it, fuel and oxygen You bring in air, you have fuel in a tank, you pump the fuel, you suck in the air, there's a mixture that takes place. So that fuel and oxygen delivery occurs by virtue of your circulation system. Your heart that pumps the right type of fuel, whether that be, or what I say, right type of liquid, not liquid, fluid, through the body. You then have an accelerator pedal, which is your thyroid glands. You have a gearbox, which works in many ways synonymous with your adrenal glands. Service and repair, which I alluded to before, MOT, annual service, biannual service. Service and repair will be the same as sleep. The body needs to rest so that it can recover. Sleep is just as vital as feeding the body. The toolkits we have in the car, we call your methylation cycle. Cleaning oil and things that we actually have in the car with things like antioxidants. So, every few weeks in a year, that could be, for some people, every 26 weeks, you change the oil in the engine. For some people, it happens every 10,000 miles. It all depends on the car. But your antioxidants and the things you take into the body regularly serve that purpose. You have what I call your detoxification system in a car, which is your catalytic converter, operates and functions as a detoxifier. The body works in the same way. Now here is what's fascinating about everything I've shared so far. That is the business of generating energy and spending energy. There's a part of the whole process which is key, which is the driver. The driver is just as important, and that's the individual, which is you. So your body, I wish I could demonstrate this in a pictorial form. Your body, and you might say, some people use the word, your mind. Some people use the brain, as I use for the example, work together, but they're not one and the same thing. So the driver of the car, we would say that's your brain, that's your heart, that's your mind. The early Egyptians and the early theologians would say, as a person thinks in their heart, so are they. The heart there reference was the subconscious mind. But in this particular instance, I'm saying, as a driver of the car, I'm using your brain, I'm using your heart. This analogy, I hope, allows you to see how your physical body goes through a daily process of creating energy and spending energy. And if any one part of the components is not operating in its optimal state, it means that the car doesn't function. You have misfiring. The car goes into a limp mode, and you just know something isn't right. I don't know about you, but some men, not all men, some men have this thing, very strange relationships with their cars. So you can see a young boy, a young man, an older man, who loves his car so much that when the car isn't functioning well, it affects the person's mood because he just knows something is wrong. He knows the car really well. He knows when it's firing and working well, but when something isn't right, there's a feeling of sadness. He feels as though he's almost depressed. Human beings go through the same process. The question then is, if we have all these components in the body that are responsible for generating energy, how do we then spend this energy? Think about the question. All things remaining equal, you have everything needed to ensure that the car operates and operates properly. We assume the driver is in good health, the engine is in a good state, the adrenal gland, which is in this particular instance is the gearbox, the thyroid's working well, which is your accelerator pedal, the fuel system, everything is working well. How do you then spend energy? Remember, the way you spend or use energy is when you drive the car. So you drive the car from point A to point B, you are spending energy. You're burning fuel, you're using oxygen, you're using oil, you're using water. At some point, you drain the system from its full state to a state that is perhaps trending towards empty. The body spends energy in different ways, just like a car spends energy. One of the ways, I should say this is key. The car spends energy based on the energy delivered to the car, but the driver in the car also uses energy. You know, driving is a difficult task, especially if you live in a busy city. If you've ever driven in central London, you know it entails staying very, very, very alert, keeping an eye out for, you know, the person walking on the curb and potential hazards, 3-4 steps down, traffic lights, noise, distraction, someone waving at someone, and suddenly you're looking and you can have an accident. It's a huge amount of energy, both concentration, focus, but also the emotional toll. Road rage, someone abusing you, saying things, suddenly emotionally, someone actually attempting to run into your car, you're emotionally charged. So the body uses energy and spends energy, just in the same way that the driver in a car uses energy. The question, especially if you're thinking about depression, is how does the body spend energy? Now, this is not something has come upon me from nowhere. I've had to learn. I've had the rare opportunity of actually learning from someone who I consider to be the best doctor in the country, and someone who has, in my opinion, I'm sure everyone will have their own perspective. In my opinion, has no equal from the perspective of how exceptional a doctor the person is. I hold her in very high esteem. The body spends energy in many ways. The business of just staying alive is the first. We call that your basal metabolism, which is, remember, unlike a car that can just sit there and do nothing until you start the car, a human being cannot just sit there and do nothing. There are things happening whether you like it or not. The heart is pumping, circulating the liquids throughout the body. The body, you have things such as water in the body moving into various parts. Water in the body in the form of fourth phase water, which is mixing either with ultra infrared light to create this separation exclusion zone, which ensures and guarantees that your body stays, not guarantees, which ensures your body stays at an optimum temperature. Whatever you do, even if you were to lay still, even when you were sleeping, the body is working. So just the business of staying alive, the business of survival, the business of hunting and looking for food, business of shelter, security, even the business of procreating consumes energy. We call it basal metabolism. That's the basic. Now, what's fascinating as I studied this was 2/3 of the energy the body spends with regards to just keeping us alive is assigned to all of these activities. So your basal metabolic spend is 6 to 6.67% of all the energy generated in the body. Now think about this carefully. The reason I'm saying think about this carefully is if there isn't enough energy, if 100% of energy is generated and you need 2/3 just to stay alive, then it means you have surplus 1/3 remaining for other functions. But if you generate 50% of energy, then it means automatically you are in an energy deficit state. You're not generating as much energy just to stay alive. Now, the second way the body spends energy is through our immune system. It's an immunological spending requirement. We have acute infections. Sometimes we have normal infections. Sometimes we have what we call invaders seeking a safe place, safe area in our bodies to nest and reproduce. Our immune system therefore has to work. It's always like a standing army. Think about in the olden days, we had movies that showed, people on horses and chariots and foot soldiers advancing towards this city. and you had a moat. You had the city gates. You had fighters inside the city gates. The moat, firstly, was the first line of defense. Then you had the city walls and the city gate. Behind the city gate, you had foot soldiers and the army waiting, sometimes using projectiles, bow and arrows, slings, long-range projectiles to attack the invaders before the invaders get to the city gate or get past the moat. That's your immune system. This simply means the immune system is always working. But the problem is, and this is where it gets fascinating, because when people think about depression, and again, I used to be very naive to the whole thing of it's all in the mind, and you just have to have a strong will and a strong focus and a strong sense of self, and more importantly, recognize that the psychological aspect is key, that the body will follow the mind. That's all well and good. But something was missing in that thought process, which is, in order for the mind to work, the body has to be in a fit state. It has to have the basic nutrients. It has to be like a car. The driver might be emotionally sound, but if the car doesn't function, then the car doesn't go anywhere, and therefore the driver is stuck. Our immune system is always under attack. Always. Always. Sometimes the attack is almost laughable, not serious, and some other times it's more acute. Unfortunately, sometimes things go awry where we then have issues like allergy or autoimmunity. Now, allergy generally is something that happens in the body where our body switches on our immune system wrongly, inappropriately, because it's trying to deal with substances, matters on the outside. And effectively, it means your immune system is not functioning. There's something wrong where your immune system, by virtue of inflammation in the body, is dealing with something external. Inflammation due to external substances outside the body, that response we call allergy. Autoimmunity is the reverse. This is where your body is working and trying to address matters or responding to matters with regards to tissues that are inside the body. Again, another inflammatory, you might say, reaction. Inflammation as a result of internal issues with regards to tissues in the body. The immune system is effectively working against itself. So firstly, we have the business of staying alive, the basal metabolism. Secondly, we have the issues with regards to the immune system. And the third is then what I call the emotional spending in the body by virtue of what we use energy for with regards to the brain, the heart, our emotions. Let me take you a few steps back. I started by saying, think about your body as a car, and think of yourself as the driver of the car. There's several parts of the vehicle. You have the engine, which is your mitochondria. You have things such as your adrenal glands, which is actually you might say your gearbox, how you gear up in life, and stress comes and you just change it. Think about your driving, and you're going up a hill, you drop a gear from 3 to 2 or from 4 to 2. That gives you the extra push. Then you move back to 3, you accelerate. You have the accelerator pedal, which is your thyroid glands. All of these things play a huge role in making sure the car is in a good state, generating the energy the body needs. And then there's the driver. So in terms of how we spend energy, we can generate as much energy as we can. If it's not up to 100%, then it means we don't, possibly, not always, possibly are not generating as much as we need. If we need to spend 100%, think about this. When we talk about money, one of the ways we say is the sure pathway and the foundation to creating wealth is that you spend less than you earn. You live within your means. That also means if you earn X, you must spend less than X so that you have a surplus. If you spend more than you earn, then you always have a deficit. And money compounds. Similarly, energy and energy use compounds. You can generate energy, and let's say you generate 80% of the energy the body needs. It means you're in a deficit. But in terms of spending energy, the business of staying alive, the basal metabolism requires 2/3 of all the energy you generate, that the body generates. The brain at rest consumes about 20% of the energy in the body. That's a huge amount. So when we think about those who say I'm depressed or anxious, we're using a lot of energy in the heart, in the brain, just to stay in a positive state. The problem, however, is if you're not generating enough energy and you're spending so much energy, then it gets to a point where the body starts to shut itself down to protect you. Now, I mentioned this two sessions prior. Whenever the body has demands placed on it that far exceed what the body can naturally deal with, the body starts to shut down. For example, there are times when you just feel tired. You just can't explain it. You just have no energy. That's the body's way of slowing the whole process down, because the body is saying, if you spend more energy than you have and that you have created, you will die. And therefore, the body has to do something to slow you down so that you don't spend more than you have. Unlike money, where if you have a credit card and there's an agreed overdraft or spending credit limit, then you can spend more. The body does not give you a credit card balance. It doesn't say spend much more than you have and everything will be okay. Sometimes you can exert the body beyond what it has available, but you pay the price the next day. So as I bring today's session to a close, and the key part of today's session is to keep in mind the energy equation, that we create energy, we spend energy. If we spend more than we create, we go into a deficit position, which is not good for us long term, and that affects our physical well-being, our emotional, psychological well-being, and even our spiritual well-being. If we spend less than we have created, we have a surplus. And understanding how we actually spend energy in these three, you might say, categories, the business of staying alive, your immune system, and the brain, is what I would try to expand on as we move forward. The key reason for this is simple. Think about this. If 2/3 of the energy spent by the body is just in the business of staying alive, then it simply means that there are things that you and I can do to be more efficient in how we use and spend energy, which means we can have more surplus. If we spend more than we create, and we spend all of that spending in the first state, your basal metabolism, what you find is there's no energy for your immune system, which means people then go into the whole business of allergy and autoimmunity. But even more importantly, it means there is no energy for the brain, which is why some people just feel tired and knackered and feel as though something isn't right. I used to be young, I used to be healthy, I used to be fun, and I just have no energy. Why? They're not creating any surplus to spend on other parts that require energy. Some people will go for a walk and they need to lie down, sleep for 4 or 5 hours because they're exhausted, no energy. Some other people wake up first thing in the morning and they stand up and they feel dizzy. Why? The body has no energy. Just the business of keeping you alive is consuming all of the energy you have. Therefore, what that means is, in the same manner that someone might sit down with you and say, let's go through your financial statements and your budget and your spending. And they say, well, there's something perhaps you haven't observed. Every morning, you go into the coffee shops and you spend £7 on coffee and a treat in the morning. You do that for the whole week, 5 days, £35. That means in a month, you're spending £140, £50 just on coffee. For lunch, you go down to the shop next door to the coffee shop and you buy a prepared meal, sandwiches. You spend £4.50, then you buy yourself a drink. It comes up to about £8. You do that 5 times a week, that's 40 quid across the whole month, across 4 weeks. 160. So you have 160 pounds and 150 pounds. So you're spending about 300 plus prior to 3 p.m. every single day. At the end of the day, you go to the pubs and you have 2 or 3 pints, and it comes up to about 15 pounds every single day, 5 days a week, 75 pounds every single week across the whole month, 4 weeks. You're spending roughly about 300 pounds. So you have 300 pounds just on alcohol, just over 300 pounds on food, 600 pounds. And so the financial planner sits down with you and says, well, it's not necessarily that some of your appetites and desires have to be set aside. But they say, well, there's a different way you can do this. If we look at what you have every morning, which is your coffee, you like coffee, no problem. Rather than buy the coffee from the shops, why don't you buy the best coffee brands, the best seeds or coffee beans? I don't drink coffee, so I don't really know. Coffee beans. Maybe buy an espresso machine and leave it at home. So in the morning, you make yourself coffee. And by doing that, you spend maybe 90 pence per day instead of what you spend. And that would mean you don't spend money on the scones or the cupcakes and all that. There's a saving. And they say to you, well, why don't you, every evening before you go to bed, you can buy the bread from the supermarket and you can make yourself a sandwich for work. And you can make the sandwich to your taste and preferences. And in doing that, rather than spend £7, £8 during lunch, the cost of doing that from home is £2. Again, in the evenings, maybe you shouldn't drink every day. Maybe you can start from TGIF, thank God it's Friday, and suddenly you're saving, over 10 quid every day just on alcohol. From all that spending of roughly £600, you reduce your overall spending by 80%. Or something like that. So you go from £600 spending, and now you're spending just £200. So you've saved £400. That £400 can go into other important things. You can spend it, or it could be saved in a similar manner. If you go through what you generate and what you're spending, if you spend efficiently and smartly and wisely, then you have surplus to either use towards your immune system or just towards your emotional well-being, your brain, your heart, and fun. Now, the key part of all of this is to keep in mind, energy can be spent just like money. Energy is created or generated, is delivered and spent. If you spend more than you generate and create, you're in a deficit. But even importantly, if you generate enough to meet all of your needs, but you do not deliver it sufficiently, you would be no different from a car that has a full tank, but the delivery system, the fuel pump isn't working. So fuel is not going from the tank to the engine, and therefore the car sits there stuck. Now, I hope today's session has been useful. In the session that follows, I'm going to try to expand more on this, and we'll go into the detail. And we're going to build on this over the next few sessions, and I hope it starts to become clearer. I'm going to talk about food a lot as I move forward, because I've learned so much about food and our diet, and how it's key to a lot of the issues we have. We talk about having the right fuel in the tank, but that just means eating the right food. I hope the sessions to follow are something that you find valuable.